Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Community Connections. Before I introduce you to our really special guest, and you're going to want to stick around for this, I promise you're really going to want to stick around for this. We got to do our weekly check-in with the Rob Meister. Rob, you back there?
Yes, sir. How are you today?
All right. I heard a different music to the setup.
Yeah, we were running into some copyright issues with the other tunes, so we're gonna have to find some other. We're gonna find some other tunes.
Well, we were in here whispering while that was playing. Can the audience hear that?
Can the audience hear you whispering?
Yeah, during the intro.
Not then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we could hear you.
Oh, okay. So I guess we better watch what we say about those guys back there, huh? So with me, it's usual, is my co-host. If you're a co-host, does that make you a hostess? And if you're the hostess, am I the hoster?
Good morning, Robert J. Downey. I'm not even really sure how to answer that question. I don't think a hoster is the right word.
A hoster is not the...
Host and hostess.
Oh, okay. How about just...
Or host and co-host, and then it makes us more egalitarian.
Egalitarian, yes. Okay. Hey, one of the things that you have in your toolbox of all the amazing things that you do is that you do a little stand-up comedy, and you can be funny at times to the right audience, right?
Yes. In a limited capacity, at the right time, in the right place, I can be funny.
Well, I didn't know we have a comedian on our staff who can be very funny, and I heard it last Thursday, and I was about falling out of my chair half the time. And it was just so stinking funny.
It was. I was there.
You were there, right? You agree. It was funny. So why don't you introduce us to the special funny guy who also does some amazing work, and we'll talk about that too.
All right. So this is Avery Vi, and his name is spelled differently, and so it's just confusing right from the get-go. And you're going to find out later what Avery does. But Avery is part of our team. And we're going to start this morning by talking a little bit about Avery's own personal story, because we like to tie that into what we do. Everybody has a personal why, right? Everybody does. We have a why for what we do. And often, if we're really fortunate and God orchestrates it, our organization's why matches our why, and then magic happens. And so this is a case where I think that's true. So, Avery, tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up, what your family was like, how it was like for you as a child growing up.
So, I grew up in Franklin County, Virginia. I know it's hard to tell from my accent, but, that is in Virginia. A lot of people think it's West Virginia. I've also heard, you sound just like my aunt from Georgia. And I think, why aunt? So, I did come from Virginia. It's just outside of Roanoke. But I grew up in a really, really poor family. First 6 years of my life, we lived in a little fishing cottage. It was a little one-bedroom cottage, not ever meant to be lived in. But we were so poor, the way we paid rent for that house is the man who owned the land owned cows across the street. Well, I say street. It wasn't. It was a dirt road, not quite a street.
Yeah.
And so we would have to go feed the cows every day. And that's how we paid for rent. So we were pretty poor. Before Mom and Dad got that little place, they were actually living out of a car. So that's how I came into the world. Dad was a really bad alcoholic, involved in drugs a good bit too. And Mom, she drank a good bit too. I think Dad's alcoholism really kind of masked Mom's problem so much growing up. And she was really emotionally unavailable for the most part because of all the abuse she was going through. So it was a really, really chaotic childhood. I mean, there were many times where, I'd take off running in the middle of the night, jump out the bedroom window, running down the gravel road and dirt road, wherever we were, trying to call for help. We didn't have cell phones, computer, internet, anything like that. So, and if the phone was ripped out of the wall, you couldn't call from home either. So,
yeah.
So, in all of that, and maybe we're jumping ahead, but do you point back to some factor that helped you move out of that? Like, what was the thing that allowed you to change the trajectory of your life and to be a cycle breaker?
It was what really started that. Well, there were a couple things. It was around the same time. There was somebody on the school bus I rode the school bus with had invited me to church. It was really interesting because all the problems I had with Dad. That night, the person after I got to church didn't even speak to me when I got to the youth group. She didn't acknowledge me. And so I tried to talk to her, and she acted like she didn't know me. And I don't know what that was about. And so I remember after the service, I asked to go back and talk to the pastor, which was so... I thought it was bizarre. Very, very bizarre, especially considering how I had difficulties with men and authority relationships a lot of times because of the abuse from Dad. And now I know, though, that was the Spirit of God leading me back there. So that started me on the trajectory of a changed life, really. But what propelled it even more, in an interesting kind of way, I can look back and thank God for this now, but there was a point where, I was bullied in school a lot, had a lot of difficulties with making friends, any of the kind of connections I felt like I developed in school was mostly teachers. And so there was a point in 9th grade where I had just had enough. And I had threatened to kill myself. I said, Mom, I'm definitely going to kill myself if you don't pull me out of school. I just felt like it was too much. I could not handle school anymore. And so she did. She pulled me out of school. And so in an interesting way, that led me down a completely different path too. The Lord used that.
So obviously you did go back to school. How did you end up coming back and then going on to school? Like, what motivated you to do that? School's not great. Yep. You're pulled out. Yeah. And now you're sitting here, and I think you have quite a bit of education. So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, so, we were supposed to be homeschooled, and I don't know how you can be homeschooled by a high school dropout. Mom never even graduated high school. She's retired now. She would never want me to say that out loud because they might actually find out who she is at her workplace. So we really weren't homeschooled. I really was. I dropped out in 9th grade around January, so halfway through the school year. Mom, after my dad ended up passing away when I was 16, and after he passed away, it was within a couple months. Mom found herself in a relationship with a boyfriend she brought home the same night she met him. He was also an abusive alcoholic. Well, there was just my brother and I. We were very different. He was a hands-on kind of guy. He was big into cars. It still is. And so I was not big into cars and building stuff. Now I talk to people for a living. That's definitely not building cars, or working on cars. So because of that, her boyfriend didn't like me, and he kicked me out. I was 17. He kicked me out of the house, and she allowed him to. And so I have lived on my own since 17. And so I went and worked full time. I got my own place. And it's that path that the Lord used to help put me in a position of making something for myself. I always felt different than my family for whatever reason. And so I fought really hard to get where I am. I went back. I wanted to go to college, and so I went and took I went and got my GED, and then I went and took the SAT on my own, and then I enrolled in college all on my own. Had no help from anyone. Wow. And so thank God, too, it was the year before the cutoff where you actually had to have a parent sign off on loans. They had a special program before that year that allowed people in my situation, that may have changed now, but I was able to enroll in college and graduated with my undergrad, and then went on to grad school and graduated with honors.
Here you are.
And here I am.
That's pretty cool. So, talk a little bit more about school.
Yeah, so a school-based program.
No, not yet.
Not school.
Your
Okay.
experience in school. So you were
My
bullied.
experience in school was really, really hard. You know, I thought when I had threatened to kill myself because school was too much, I thought school was a problem. And, you know, there's a lot of times where I look back and realize now in life it's so hard for someone living in such a traumatic environment to really identify what the real problem is. And so it's often masked by other things. And so really school was just like the cherry, if you will, on top. And so I thought the cherry on top was what the problem was. And it wasn't. School really wasn't the problem. In fact, school was my saving grace if I allowed it to be, but I couldn't see that it was a saving grace.
That makes sense. So we have a commercial, right? That we're
Yeah.
going to show.
Yeah,
Do the guys know which one it is?
they do.
All right.
So let's.
Do you have anything you want to say first before we go there?
Well, it's an amazing story, and it is leading up to what Avery does, which is he's now speaking for a living or talking to. Actually, you're listening for a living, and then helping people guide that. But he's doing it in the school system, the same place that almost destroyed his life. He's in there. But before we get into that, we have a commercial. We talk about our different ministries, and Hope for Tomorrow is the ministry under which Avery works. So let's do that, guys.
Hope for Tomorrow is a great opportunity for people to get the help that they're needing.
We're passionate about making sure that every person has a meaningful relationship that can guide them.
All right. I think I misunderstood what commercial that was. That was just about Hope for Tomorrow. And I love that it started about the listening. So before we, again, I'd like to just tie in a little bit more with your story before we talk about what you do. So I identify myself as a recovering orphan. Does that resonate with you? I know you had a mom and a dad. Your dad did die, right? But for me, an orphan is anybody who's absent a parent, right? Death, disappearance, disillusion, and even dysfunction, right? So sometimes I think the kids who hurt the most are those who have physical parents in their life, but they're not there for them. And it can still do a deep cut in their spirit, right? Would you identify with that at all?
Oh, absolutely identify with that, yeah.
Yeah. So you did the education part to start turning things around for you and breaking the cycle. But there had to be some healing done in your own life, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So tell us about the healing part. How you had to get back at least well enough to be able to go walk back into a school system and be with kids, right? Without triggering traumas all the time for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was, I wanted help so bad as a kid. I really, really did. I knew that home was a problem. I wanted to talk to somebody, anybody who would listen to help me with dealing with home life. And I truly didn't know who to talk to. I would try to talk to my guidance counselor at school some. And that only got me, but so far, we as a family had court-ordered therapy at one point. And I was so excited about that.
Oh, really?
And I finally felt when we went to those sessions that somehow, some way, I had a voice. And I never felt like that before. And I had someone who actually recognized me and what I was dealing with. And that was very short-lived. And it did not go as far as I felt like I really, and as far as I really needed it to. Fast forward, though, I found myself in at a place where I was really, really struggling with my mom's detachment, her drinking, just there are many different things regarding addictions that I just felt like I was struggling with so much as an adult. And so I finally found myself in counseling, and that really, really helped for a long time too, because it was, it wasn't the short 10 to 12 sessions that I heard counseling would be in my graduate program. It took years. It's a hard fight to fight.
It is. It is. If I can ask a deeply personal question, was substance an attraction to you? Right, you grew up in a family of alcoholics, so was that ever a temptation?
No, absolutely not.
That was your rebellion.
I joke and I tell people I quit drinking when I was 12. And while that's funny, there is a lot of truth to it. And so, I have not ever drank alcohol as an adult. I've not ever used any kind of substance other than things that were prescribed to me. And I thought that I had escaped addiction so well, and I had no problems with it until I realized that I absolutely have an addiction to substances, and it's food. So I have battled that for a long time.
I understand. One more quick question, also kind of intimate and personal, but looking back now as a professional looking at your parents, not as a wounded child, right, but as a professional, you look back at your parents. Do you think there was a lot of trauma in their life, and that's what was living out? Oh,
absolutely. And there is a place in therapy where I was able to come to terms with that, and that's what the real message of forgiveness is. I actually forgive myself enough of all of those chains that would tie me and hold me as a victim to whatever I grew up in, as a victim to other circumstances and situations in life. I can forgive myself of that, where I don't have to any longer hold on to that, and I can understand and appreciate both mom and dad for whatever they were, whatever they offered, because it has tremendously aided me in my adult life. Wonderful. Everything that I grew up in. Granted, it wasn't easy and it wasn't fun, but in its own right, it was a gift.
So now tell us about the ministry of healing that you're involved in.
Can I interject? Can I interrupt
go ahead,
you?
please. Yeah,
Will you let me?
Yes. By the way, you look lovely today, Claudia.
You said you weren't going to say that.
Well, that's what you get for interrupting me. But go ahead.
Just an interesting, there's a book that talks about how a lot of us start as victims, right? And then we either choose whether we're going to subconsciously or consciously become a hero or a villain in someone else's story. And some people, look at all the superheroes, right? They start out as orphans, right? And then they become heroes. And if they have the right guide, they can do that. But one of the things that's really helped me is to kind of what Avery had to do in looking at his parents, to see them not as villains, but as victims themselves. And I think you've done that as well, just to look back and say, wait a minute, they might have been a villain in my story, but their story started out with them being a victim too, and they didn't have the right guides to help them get to where they could be a hero, and so they got stuck villainizing someone else's story. And so reframing that, I think, is really important. When we look at people, it's kind of like not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. But you're not the villain in this story. You started out as a victim. And how can I have compassion and forgiveness for somebody who was also a victim?
So now you're the hero, right? And you're trying to change the life trajectory of a bunch of kids in the same kind of setting where you were victimized so much. Tell us about the work you're doing there, Avery.
Yeah, so it's really it's so fascinating and incredible. I was offered this position. I started with Hope for Tomorrow, just doing outpatient counseling. And then I remember Jen had called me or reached out to me through Brian and said, Jim Heron actually, and said, "Hey, we need some help providing some in-school service, school-based services." And so I agreed to it, and I moved into that position, and then I was offered to kind of oversee the school-based program. And what's so fascinating about it is it's the one thing that I did think was destroying my life when I was in ninth grade. I thought that it was the one thing that was killing me. And I said a little bit ago that it was actually my saving grace. And to see the redemptive work of God in my life and His grace and bringing me to a position of putting me in this place where I am actually in school, providing therapy, and helping to be that meaningful relationship in these kids' lives that I so desperately needed in ninth grade is just tremendously powerful.
It is the story of redemption, reconciliation. It really is the whole gospel story right there, Avery. I mean, when you see a child in school, does your trauma alarm system go off and you can you see the hurt sometimes, right? Because hurt can sometimes identify with hurt without hardly even knowing this child.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I see it all the time.
And do you think the child recognizes that you're somebody that recognizes that in them, and maybe you're safe enough for them to tell their story?
Yeah, I hear that all
Do you really?
the time, that I am the first person in a lot of these kids' lives they've ever felt cared enough, they ever felt safe enough to even talk about the things they talk about. It's pretty powerful stuff. Yeah.
So the school-based program right now for us is we have our counselors in the school district in Appomattox County, in which you are helping to coordinate that. Tell us your dream of what you would love to see happen, right? Because you're seeing some success in that, right? You're seeing some victories happening in that. And it's such important work in such an important place. Tell us your dream. What would what's God put in your heart, man?
The power of this and what it means to these kids' lives. And I see myself in this position, in the position of these kids that I'm meeting with. They need a saving grace. They need a lifeline, as I desperately did in ninth grade. And seeing that it literally is the difference between life and death a lot of times, I think that it has tremendous impact and power in these kids' lives, and can literally change their life trajectory. And I think that this program should be in every school, not even in the state, but in the nation.
Wow.
There's a lot of hurting kids
Yeah.
out there who need help.
Listen, if somebody's listening to this, either live or you're going to watch this later, you've got some resources to make this happen make it happen in a county or statewide or something. I think it really is key. Talk about getting in front of the kids who are hurting, right? There's only two places where these kids are. They're either in foster care or they're in public school. That's how you get access to kids who are hurting, right, where you can really make a difference. We used to think they'd be at church. If you can, right? First of all, if you can find them, and then if you can get them there, and then if they feel comfortable well enough to stay. But they're going to be at public school. They're going to be in foster care. So here's our chance, right, to really go upstream and help some kids. But also, are you helping families too? How's that happening? What's going on with that?
We're absolutely helping families. By identifying the unique position in the school is, it's not while we are providing outpatient therapy, it's not just outpatient therapy. I mean, we are building community because we are a part of the public school system in a way, and so we're able to meet with kids, we're able to meet with families, we're able to meet with community partners to help bridge this gap in community, to bridge this gap in relationships that people have, and so to bring everyone together, but especially ministering to the whole family in a way that changes every person involved.
So what makes it unique, the program that we're doing? Yeah. Why is it different than day treatment? Why is it different than going to see your school counselor? There's school counselors that are already there, so why would we need another school counselor in there?
Well, school counselors are really maxed out in many ways. with being able to meet the need. I mean, there is such significant growing need and things going on with these children. The school counselors do not have enough time or resources to meet all of those needs. And so, well, the unique thing about our program compared to many other programs is that we break down all barriers for these kids getting help. We don't. If the kid doesn't have an ability to pay, we don't charge them. We don't say we can't see you, we can't provide services to you. Many times kids go without therapy because the parents don't think there's great enough need. It's not worth the inconvenience of driving you a half an hour to an appointment, have to sit out in my car, or the gas money. You've got problems, but not that many.
Or they have to take off work to take them, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's so many different barriers to a kid really getting help. And so we break down all of those. And if a kid needs help and they want counseling, then we give it to them.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
And right in the building.
Right in the building.
And they can take, if they need to come, they can skip a class. The teachers are okay with them taking a class period to come down and see you?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if they see a therapist outside of the school, I mean, it's no guarantee that the therapy session is going to be after school. And so, they'll have to miss a full hour. But then a half an hour drive time, a half an hour back, and these kids don't come back right away, or so they'll miss half a day to even a full day just to have therapy. And so we cut down all of that.
Yeah, so it's very practical. So back to you folks with resources. Did you hear what he said? Right, we don't turn a child or a family away for financial reasons, which means it's got to be right. He likes having some income, right, so that you can live,
please.
right? So that's the beautiful part of that, right? If you donate and you dedicate your donation, Hope for Tomorrow Counseling, it's going to go to counseling, right? It doesn't pay my salary, it won't pay Clyde's salary, right? It doesn't go to administrative costs. It's going to meet that need for that child, and so that's just one good reason to support us. But I think you can see from the heart of this counselor, another reason is that we really want to help. For him, I don't think it's about the paycheck. I mean, he needs to have a paycheck because we all need to live. But man, his heart's there. He's called there. He's lived it. So it's not just like a professional kind of thing. It's personal. It's a passion thing for you too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's this program and what I do is saving my life. Like if I can look back, I mean, it really is a ministry to me as a child, and all the hurt and the pain that I dealt with. It is a continuation of the saving grace of God in my life.
Paul said, or working out your salvation with fear and trembling, right? And you think, well, I didn't know if I had to work out my salvation. But salvation is more than being saved. It is the act of continually being saved, sanctified, getting better, getting more like Christ, right? And that is about healing, right? About getting the right spirit of things in us. So I agree with you. I mean, it's part of the reason I show up every day at work too. I'm so glad, not only that you're part of this organization, but I'm so glad you're there for those kids in Appomattox County, and I'd love to see it in Bedford County, and Campbell County, and Amherst County, and Lynchburg City Schools. But we would also not only need resources, we'd have to find more counselors.
Yes.
And that's hard to find licensed professional counselors. And we love them to have a faith, right? And just real quickly, right? You have your own faith story. We heard a little bit about that. Right? But for those who are a little maybe going, okay, is that allowed in school? How is he even in school? You're providing good therapy, right? You're not, and they're preaching the gospel or trying to win souls. You're trying to change people's lives, but you're doing it from a faith perspective nonetheless. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah. I mean, we meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Just as Jesus met people where they were. And just as Jesus meets us where we are, we, as counselors with Hope for Tomorrow in school, are able to meet these kids just where they are and provide them hope, because they don't many of them don't have any. And so, yeah, we are able to utilize anything that is beneficial to them, such as faith. If they have religious practices like prayer and things like that really help them, we're able to integrate that in the therapy session. But it's also bringing a person to a place where they can even be open to a faith, because so many of them are so closed off.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story, Claudia. Any final thoughts?
Not today. That's good.
I think so too. So there's a lot of things you could do. First of all, lift up Avery in prayer and all of the other counselors. Can you name some of the counselors?
Yeah, we have Amy Dove and Erica Theodoridis and Mary Boyette.
Okay, so those are some of the folks that you can pray for. And while you're at it, pray for the other Hope for Tomorrow counselors in all the different locations, 8 locations, and in-home, right? And pray for them. Pray for God to send us some more counselors, right? Committed to the mission, who have that heart.
Yes, please.
And then pray for the resources so that we can grow this really critically important ministry. So I introduced him as a comedian, and I promise you he is, when he does the stand-up thing, is really funny. So when next time you see him, say, Avery, tell me the story about when Mr. Little had to pee. And it's going to be hilarious. I just had to put that in there. Is that all right?
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Hey, glad that you joined us. I know that you probably got something out of this. So tune in next Thursday for Community Connection. See you then.
Nobody gets to choose their family. If a person is fortunate enough to be born into a healthy family, then life can be much like floating down a smooth, gentle river in the summertime. But an unhealthy family is like a dangerous river, filled with rocks, debris, and fast-moving water. This river swiftly leads to the steep waterfall of adulthood, tragically forming a new river of dysfunction. Even if you aren't born into an unhealthy river, there are many streams that cause a person to get there. But there is only one way to get out, and that is through a meaningful relationship. Across our region, there are many agencies, churches, and families who are devoted to helping children escape from unhealthy rivers. Some feel their role is to wade in and rescue children. They foster, adopt, or provide safe families. Others stand by the river and support the rescuers by providing what they need. Still, others are upstream and stand in the gap to keep children from ending up in the negative situations. At Patrick Henry Family Services, we see ourselves as having an additional role. We are running up and down the shores of the unhealthy river, screaming, "Can't you see the children in the water? You have to do something." Vision 30 is a 10-year initiative. By 2030, we envision a region where all children are safe in their own family, or with caregivers who are supported by a local faith community. So, where do you stand at the river? Are you upstream, keeping families together and strong by standing in the gap? Are you in the river, directly impacting children? Are you on the shore, providing support for the brave folks who have entered the river? Or are you just passing by without noticing? No matter who you are, come down to the river with us. Let us help you find your place. Not only will lives be changed, but you will never be the same.